go here, but just wanted to welcome everybody and appreciate everybody taking their time out to sit in on our webinar, and we want to keep this interactive as possible. So as we go through, if you have questions, please feel free to type them in. I can unmute you at times if you want, and in the end, we'll set aside time if you want to have some discussion. Just want to, again, thank everybody, and special thanks to Jim for taking his time to talk to us today about our topic of key qualities of a successful mentor. And certainly, I think Jim fits that mold pretty well, and something everybody should aspire to is, we look at, well, first of all, welcome, Jim. Thanks for being here, and I'll let you sort of say hello to us. So thanks for everybody for being here, and thanks, Jim, for taking your time, and really look forward to some of your thoughts and your ideas here. So, what I wanted to do was start out by telling you a little bit about Jim and letting Jim tell you a little bit about himself. He's you can see here he's obviously very successful. Spent a lot of time at Chevy Chase Club, and certainly that's an anomaly now to be in a position that long is something to aspire to. So, Jim, some questions for you before we go through our presentation. But I thought that maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you've seen change in the industry, or as it relates to mentoring over the last 30 years. How have things changed, or how has your approach changed, or has it?
By the way, thanks for having me. It's great to be here, and thanks for asking me to share some of my thoughts. It has changed quite a bit. I think in general, most of our daily activities have increased dramatically with emails and so forth and so on, and staying up with technology. So the demands of the business have increased. We don't have as much time to compete, playing events and so forth as we did 20 years ago. But staffing, I think, has become a little bit more difficult because you rely on your staff so much to help you with all those things you need to do day in and day out, and sort of be a representation of you when you're not around at the club. So it's become a little bit more of a service industry. So hiring people that are friendly, nice people, service-oriented becomes a little bit more of a priority. And I just find that I spend a lot more time with my staff than I used to. I used to take it for granted, but I've learned how to work with my staff and be a little bit better leader than I did originally.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, and in my experience, I would say that to me it seems like the expectations have changed, not only from the members' point of view. Obviously, I think club members have a different expectation now than they did probably when you first started at Chevy Chase, and then the same thing with staff, and these individuals to your assistants. What's their expectations of how much they should be working, and things like that. Do you see that change from both of those sides? I don't know if you caught my last question there. I was asking, the expectations of not only the members, obviously, I'm sure, have changed over the time that you've been there, but also from the staff standpoint, the assistants and their expectations of the amount of hours and maybe other things around their employment. What's your thought on that, on those expectations?
Well, I know there's somebody out there in the audience that may not appreciate this as much, but I talked to my friend up the street, Bob Dolan, about this occasionally. And when we got in the business 30 years ago as assistants, we just worked every day. It wasn't even a question. It's sort of what we loved to do. And, we were there sun up to sundown. It was part of the deal. And as we've moved along, it's not so much. And guys, don't want that. And I completely understand it. So, we're a little bit more empathetic to our quality of our lives and giving our staff time off. And fortunately, we've had enough staff here to be able to cover what we need to do and also give these young men and women the time they need to be with their families. So But it's a thing you have to educate the staff on, that if you're going to be successful, you have to dedicate the time necessary to be successful. And that means whether you're in the shop, whether you're running an event, or teaching, making yourself available to do these other things, making yourself available to attend meetings and so forth. So, yeah, it's a tough life, as we all know, with the hours and the balance of family. But that's something people have to understand when they get in the golf business. So,
Right.
we do talk about that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, tell me, as far as developing the staff and mentoring, what's your biggest challenge as a mentor to the assistants or to your staff in general?
Gosh, the biggest challenge, I think, is finding the right people. I think we've got a template that's worked pretty well, and it doesn't take long to find out if you've got somebody that fits your model, what you're looking for. I've had a few people that have interviewed well and came on after a year or two, this isn't going to work out. But so finding the right people to begin with. I really haven't had problems with the staff that have been good staff. They've all done well. I've fortunately had a pretty good team the last 10 or 12 years. So finding the right people to fit what you're trying to project as a professional leader at a facility, I think, is the hardest thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And certainly interns can help. You can see through internships what kind of character people have, what kind of motivation they have, and whether they are going to be successful or not.
Have you moved many interns up into assistant positions that have been interns?
Yes, we have.
Intern for you?
Yeah, we've had, I think, over the years about 3. There have been a few others that were great interns for us that we just didn't have space for. We've actually lost a couple of good ones in the last couple of years. We just didn't have a spot in the staff for them, and fortunately been able to find them good spots.
Right. Well, let's jump into our our presentation here is about what are the key qualities, this is basically done on my research of what I felt were key qualities of mentors, and I want to have Jim just kind of talk about each of these qualities as we go through it. So the first one I identified was communication, and obviously a very key element to just human interaction is communication. What are your thoughts on that, Jim?
Well, you talk a little bit later on in the presentation about some other aspects of this, but I think in general, being consistent. You put here being clear, and I think you need to be clear with your staff with regard to what goals are and what expectations are. And I think these can be spelled out in procedures manuals. If your procedures manuals really dictate your philosophy and what you're about, then I think it's there in black and white. And also detail. I think details are important. That's what procedures manuals are all about. And that's, we spend these years and develop time and tenure at our facility, and we develop these procedures. And I've noticed sometimes when I have a first assistant move on and a new one takes over, that some of the procedures aren't followed anymore. And so you actually need to go back to your manual and say, look, this is the way we did it, and so-and-so did it, and then the next guy didn't do it, now it's not being done at all. So I think you need to be very detailed in terms of your expectations and following procedures to the T. And it's pretty easy, depending upon the issue, I think, to get away from that every now and then it may come back to hurt you. So I think it's being clear with your goals, being detailed, and also, I think, honest. Honesty is important. Being sure that you're very honest with your staff, you're clear, and you're not too tough on them, and you're honest in terms of what your expectations are and what you think of them.
Right. So the policies and procedures manual there to not fall back on, but go back to and say, hey, we're getting away from these things, and we need to reset back to these, and it's a way to kind of set the standards and have that expectation.
If you've got a great staff and a great first assistant, as I've had the privilege to have, you sort of really lean on them, and it can take you a little bit away from the day-to-day stuff that you used to do. I've learned to delegate more and more, and I rely on my staff to do more and more, and it's pretty easy over a year or two to get away from doing the things you used to do, and things can fall through the cracks when you don't stick to them.
Right, right. So our next quality that I identified was willingness to share. And obviously this can cover a lot of different things, but I've made 3 references here about skills, knowledge, and experience. And as a mentor, how important is it that you're willing to share that information? And how do you feel about that, Jim?
Well, I think the willingness to share goes both ways. I've learned a lot from my staff because they've been in the business, they've worked at other places, so this goes both ways. But certainly, at my point in my career, been here 28 years now, and having worked for great people, I had the privilege to work for Bill Strasbaugh. I mean, I can't tell you how much he shared with me. But, in terms of teaching skills and teaching philosophy, and I think the neat thing sometimes is the stories. Something could pop up in your operation, and there might be a story that can make a point. And I've probably told too many of these stories. It might be a difficult member comes in, and I've told a story. I can remember a member came in, wanted a set of clubs, and he wanted them for what basically they cost me, and I ended up doing it. And I called Bill, and I said, I just sold a set of golf clubs, and I lost a set. I lost $10. And he said to me, that might be the best $10 you ever lost. And fast forward 25 years later, I had a very difficult situation, and this particular gentleman came up to me, put his hands on my shoulder, and said, you've done a great job here, but I just want you to know that I'm behind you and I support you. And I didn't expect that. So
right.
So the stories illustrate examples of things that are happening today that also happened years ago, and examples of situations and how to deal with them and so forth. So I think that's important, certainly.
Yeah, and I think that also helps, I guess that relates to them, that they know that, you kind of walked in their shoes before. They, I guess that from the standpoint of the assistant or the mentee, they understand, like, hey, you've been through these things, or you've been in the trenches before, or you're in the trenches with them now.
Right.
So that's obviously important. Our third quality, I've got being available to listen, your approachability and having an open door policy. And I, just best practice here that I found was that to schedule, brief meetings to sort of make sure that you're staying on track. And I'm sure this goes back to what you were saying about trying not to get too far away from what your policies and procedures are. So if you're meeting regularly, whether that's scheduled or just the off the cuff. But how do you do any of that, Jim? Do you have regular scheduled meetings, or is it more just you kind of as needed?
No, we did as needed for years and years, but for the last 5 years we've gone to a weekly meeting, which is difficult for professional staffs because you have 6, 7 people. They work staggered hours, and it's really difficult to do it during working hours. So we've come up with a Tuesday morning at 7 in the morning. And if somebody's not working, we'll do a little call-in in the office so they can participate on the phone. So yeah, we've done that. It's been very helpful. We incorporate our interns. In fact, I've just had our superintendent be involved with the first 3 meetings this year. He's the first one on the agenda, and he'll review anything going on with the golf course. And the first time he came in, he took a plug of a cup from a green and showed us the root system. So so that's important. So weekly staff meetings are something we do now. Open door policy is actually a phrase I use. My door is always open. I have to make sure when somebody comes into my door, I take my head away from the computer and look at them in the eye, because I had a guy a few years ago said when he came in, he only thought I was half listening. So that came up in an appraisal, and so I said, well, I won't do that anymore. But the other thing we do is we have 3 meetings with each staff person, one at the beginning of the year, mid-season, and then end of year. So they have a chance to listen to me, but I also have a chance to listen to them, anything they're having going on in their lives, how they feel about the business, how it's going at the club, with me, with other staff, and so on. And I always ask them how that is. So if there is an issue, I want to be aware of it, and if I can help, I want to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what you were a couple points on this. I mean, the technology, like what we're doing right now, this meeting with it, we've got guys all across the country. So, I mean, to do staff meetings now and to get that information out, you don't need to be in the same room, and that's the difficulty. That's the challenge with the schedules and getting everybody together. Well, you can do it without having somebody be right there. I think that's maybe something for people to consider to utilize for staff training. And the other, you struck me a little bit there. I remember a story that Bob Mulcahy told me about when he was working for Bob Ross at Baltusrol, and he had meetings with him, and he would go in and talk to him. And he said a couple times he felt like that Bob Ross was falling asleep during those meetings and didn't, he wasn't listening to anything he said. It was like he was updating him about what was going on, and then he realized, something happened where a member was asking him a question, and he recited whatever Bob Mulcahy had told him. So he realized that he actually was, listening to him. But you can. But it is important to give people your attention, and it's hard. I mean, especially I'm sure you get how many emails a day, and your attention to having to sit down and communicate to people, and somebody walks in your office, and to take yourself away from what you're doing. But you have to do it. You've got to show that respect. So.
Yeah, sometimes that open door and they come in and want your attention, it's not always good news. So whatever it is, you've got to be able to handle it in a manner that's respectful and concerned and so forth. And you can't express despair and everything else. You've got to put on a good face. So that's not always easy to do.
Yeah, perception is reality. So and you mentioned this earlier about being honest, so this is the fourth quality, and I think that, the things that being honest and making sure that you're doing it in a respectful way, to me, I would think would be key for the individuals that are looking up to you. Just remembering back on some of the people that I worked for, and I mean, they were all very honest with me, but you kind of get the feedback in different ways. And how do you approach that if you've got a difficult situation or difficult thing to tell somebody that's constructive, but they might take it the wrong way? I mean, do you have any special ways that you like to communicate that?
Well, I first say that first of all, I care, and giving people tough criticism isn't easy. And if I didn't care, I wouldn't take the time to do it in the manner that it should be done. So, and if there's an issue that's been going on and on, I would say things like, I'm concerned about this, or with all the conversations we have, this is a little disappointing to me. So, and I try not to raise my voice, and I try to make it as honest and about the person as much as possible. So don't express any anger. But it's stating the concern and then maybe the disappointment certainly gets their attention. But when we do our performance appraisals, which are at the end of the year, we do as I mentioned earlier, pre-season meeting to establish goals, talk about the year. We do a mid-season meeting to see how the year is going, how they're doing with regard to their goals that they set, and then at the end of the year, we do these performance appraisals, and these are probably the toughest things that I do. They take me forever, and I can't do it at work. I need to go home, and it's really difficult because I want to be honest, I want to be fair, but if there's an issue, I want to bring it up, and then I've got to bring up a specific example of whatever the issue is. So these things take me forever, but when I finish the review, the satisfaction I feel is enormous. As hard as they are to prepare, once I'm finished with them, I just feel fantastic, and I think staff members know I'm on their side, and I want to help. And So that's where the honesty comes in. So, being honest in terms of grading their performance, but being fair at the same time is really, for me, very difficult to do, to be tough on somebody yet be honest. The other thing that we've done in the last, I guess, maybe 6 or 7 years is the staff reviews me. I give them a performance appraisal of me. The first assistant distributes it. Everybody fills it out. Then the first assistant compiles all the information, and they come in my office. They sit down, and they're all staring at me, and they conduct a performance appraisal on me. And I can tell you, I've learned a lot. I've been, over the years, done a couple things that I do that I didn't know, or I kind of knew but didn't know how much effect they had, and it's made a difference. It's affected the way I've interacted, and it's affected the way I've performed. So that's tough. That's really tough. I've been nervous a couple of times in that situation. So.
I can imagine so. It's kind of funny that you say that. One position that I had, I was given a young high school kid a performance appraisal, and I remember, at the end of it, I asked for feedback, and one of the things that he said, he wasn't happy with the way some of the things were going, and he said that he made some comments, and then he said something along the lines that management needs improvement or something like that, and he walked out the door, and I was thinking, I just got my appraisal. It was kind of like, wow, it sort of hit me, but it's good to get that feedback. I mean, because you gotta continue to evolve and know what's going on, right? I mean, so it's important for that honest feedback.
Now, you mentioned debate also, and I thought about this a little bit, and we really don't have too much debate. We debate a little bit about teaching philosophy from time to time, but I think you say tactful. I think it's really important to be respectful of other people's ideas, because guys do have other ideas. They've done things differently, and they bring these ideas and these experiences here, and we have a guy on our staff who's a stack and tilt guy, and and quite frankly, I've learned to understand and appreciate some of the aspects of that method that I didn't initially. So if you're not respectful, you're not going to have debate. You're not going to have exchanging ideas. So I think being respectful is important.
Yeah, good point there. Going on to our next quality here, I've said be inquisitive, and I guess that could be a lot of things, but continuing to learn and monitoring trends and knowing, trying to stay relevant within your staff, and obviously being somewhere and being in the business for as long as you have, Jim, you've seen changes, you've seen trends come and go, and in a lot of different areas. But how do you do that? How do you that continuing education? What do you do to stay ahead of that curve and be in the position you've been in for so long and keep it fresh, not only with your staff but just with the members as well?
Yeah, there's a great expression. In fact, a club maker here who was here from 1924 to 1989, 65 years, a guy named Bill Hardy, used to teach the early business schools, the club repair sections, and he said, when you're green, you grow, when you're ripe, you rot. So what that means is, we have to keep learning, we have to keep up with trends. And that's really, at this point in my career, that's one of the two main things I stress, the two main things that drive me, with staff being the other one. But, staying engaged and staying on top of things. I want to stay relevant here. I mean, I'm 58 years old, so I've got, 4 to 7 more years here, and I'm going to call it quits. And I remember the guy I replaced had been here 40 years, and I remember the comment that nice guy, but kind of went along and got along, and I just don't want to be somebody that they're looking to replace. And so that's really my motivation. So I'm reading as much as I can. Every golf magazine I'm reading. I'm relying on my staff quite a bit for, email stuff, computer stuff, spreadsheet stuff, so I can stay on top of this. I mean, all these programs, tournament programs, and websites and so forth, that's a lot to keep up with, especially if you're not 30 years old. So I rely a lot on them. But, you know, it's just being engaged and caring and so forth. I think you're just motivated to do what you do very well, and that's my motive. It's a kind of a backhanded motivation. I don't want to be the guy they're looking to get rid of, and so how do I do that? Is I stay engaged, I stay positive, I stay in shape, I keep my gaming in condition, I keep teaching as much as possible, and hopefully some of that will rub off on my guys, my girls here.
How has it changed for you over the years with your ability to delegate? Have you always had that ability, or is it something that evolved for you over time?
Oh, heck no. I did everything for years and years, and that was really the big transformation, I think, here for me was learning to let go and give people responsibility and ownership. So as a result, we've changed the structure of our staff. You know, I'm fortunate enough to have 4 assistants, first assistant plus 3. And we have 3 associations here, a junior golf association, ladies 9-holers and ladies 18-holers. And each of my staff will run one of those associations every year, and that'll switch from year to year. So after 4 years, each staff member has worked with each group. And we take our inventory, our stock inventory areas, and assign them to each staff member. And my first assistant has a lot of responsibility, from doing payroll to doing scheduling work hours and so forth and so on. So when I started to do that, the operation took off, and my staff got better. You know, during events, with the exception of maybe 4 or 5 big events, I let my staff do the announcements and do the awards. I sit back and watch and let them go. That's really hard to do, at least it was initially. And so, you know, they grow, they get better, they feel engaged, they feel important, and it helps them. But that was very hard for me to do initially. I did everything, and the more I delegated, the better we got as a team, and the better my staff got individually.
And I can relate to that because it is. I mean, I always held everything kind of close to me because you know your own work ethic, and you know how you want things done. And I mean, it takes time to trust other people to do it the way that you want them to do it, and you do have to let them make some mistakes, I think, and then learn from those. But you get so much buy-in, I think, from the staff, like you're saying. I mean, they're engaged. They feel like they're part of it. So that's interesting. Going to our next quality, and we've kind of talked about this maybe a little bit here, is about being objective and remaining fair. And this kind of goes, to being honest and giving them that feedback. A couple things my bullet points here was really, I mean, the objectivity is around, you're not just a mentor to one person, right? I mean, you're a mentor to many individuals within your staff, and develop or trying to keep that relationship professional and then also equitable across the board, where it doesn't look like one person might have more favor with you than somebody else, can be a challenge, I would imagine. I mean, in your time, have you come across that where maybe you were maybe treating one staff member different, or how has that been for you?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's natural to have favorites. In fact, one of the performance appraisals with me a couple years ago was that I favored one particular staff member a little bit more over the others, and I said, really? And they all chimed in, yes. So yeah, it happens. So I'm since become a little bit more aware of that. I try to be respectful. We try to be fair. And as I said earlier, in performance appraisals, also day-to-day relationships. I try to make sure I get out front a couple times, and I spend time with my staff right in front of the shop, and we may take that moment to have a little fun and not just be all work. So yeah, it's something I've been aware of. It's something I haven't been always good at, and I try to. And since that point, I've tried to be a little bit more aware of it as well. My wife has also told me I do that. So. So yeah, it can be tough, especially if there's somebody that you don't think is really pulling their weight, or maybe not the the best member of the team. So, trying to not let that show is important, because other staff can pick up on that, and that's not a good example.
Right, right. My one bullet point here about nothing is owed, I think that's just the fact that, the situation you're in as a mentor and a mentee is such that, they're getting something from you and you're getting something from them, and it's not, that you're, anybody owes you anything. Obviously, you feel a lot of pride with people like Chris moving on to their own positions, and that's probably what I would imagine for you is what you get out of it. Is your reward is that pride, but also, you tried to build up a program where people know that when they come to work for Jim Fitzgerald, they've got a good chance of moving on into a better position. Which obviously, having 17 guys move on over time, that's amazing. But I think that's important to have both people understand, is that it's not really that, you don't really owe them anything and they don't really owe you anything other than just that relationship and that learning.
Right.
So anyway, I thought that was kind of...
Yeah, I expect the staff, all my staff, to display their eagerness and be self-motivated. Good things happen to those people who do well, who have achieved and earned things. So, I want achievers. I want people to want to achieve and earn things. And if you do things right, if you treat people right, if you come to work and do your job with a great attitude, with a smile on your face, establish relationships, things are going to happen to you in a good way. They just do. And that should be the motivation, is to do a good job. And once that happens, usually you'll end up in a good position.
Right. My next quality here I've got is being genuine, and this is, this kind of hits back on honesty and a lot of things, but I feel like that, individuals that I was always looking for this in my staff, was people that were genuine, and you can kind of tell when people aren't genuine, and it comes across. One of the things that I was always big on was empathy, the ability to understand somebody, and this is huge, I think, in a service atmosphere with members, is to show empathy. So, it's interesting with my staff, I had a term that I called lateral service. So I was always promoting service to the members and service to, the experience, but, we also talked a lot about servicing the people you work alongside of, and I call that lateral service. And I think empathy is a huge thing, and compassion. But what can you say about that, Jim? I mean, have you come across people in your time that weren't genuine, and how did you handle that type of situation?
Yeah, I mean, they're not genuine, or they're not truthful, or something's going on, and that's a I won't wait for a performance appraisal in a situation like that. I'll put them down in my office, and I'll just say, I'm sensing something that's a little bit uncomfortable, that's not quite right. And I'm here to help, and I just want to understand what you're going through. And please share it with me, because I think it's affecting the team. So that's the tact I would take there. And we also have to be compassionate with our members. They're a lot of difficult people, but they have their lives, they have their challenges, and, bringing them here, we hope to make them forget about all that stuff, but sometimes people are the way they are for a reason. We had a difficult member years and years ago, and, I found out later on, he was tough on me. I found out later on he was in Pearl Harbor. He was on a gunship that was attacked, and I thought about it a little bit, and I said, God, that guy's experienced that, and here I am complaining that he's a little bit tough on me. So, you have to understand and understand why people are the way they are, and you have to be open to putting yourself in the position of trying to figure that out, and not always taking it in a bad way.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, that's a challenge sometimes, not to take it personally, and I always looked at it, those people, obviously, you wanted to just kill them with kindness, but it was important for me to sort of get to know them, just like you were saying. I mean, you get to know them, and you might understand something more about them.
Right.
Yeah, it's easy to just say, what, I mean, that guy's a royal pain, and I'm gonna keep my distance. But I always kind of went towards those people and tried to get a better understanding and change their way. But And anyway,
Yeah, sometimes it's not going to change, and so all you can do is put a smile on your face and put your hand out every day and just be consistent. And over time, they may soften, but you can't change your approach to them. You have to be consistent.
yeah.
You just can't turn your back, or that's not going to work. And if you do, your staff will pick up on that, and they'll see that, and that's certainly not what you want to project.
Well, and that that kind of leads me to the last slide that I have here, which is lead by example. And obviously, this is huge. You've got to be a mentor, to be somebody that's looked up to. People have to know that you're willing to do everything that you're asking them to do, and display these attributes of a positive attitude and enthusiasm, and be a motivator. How has that always been for you, Jim? I mean, have you felt like, has that changed over time? I mean, you mentioned earlier about, you always used to do things on your own, and I felt like doing that was me leading by example, but then I found out at times it was me trying to do all of that was putting my staff in a position where they felt like I wasn't trusting them. So, how do you lead by example, but then, allow them the flexibility to learn and do the things on their own?
Well, it's a little cliche-ish, but you've got to, walk the walk. And, if you're gonna in your materials that you give to your staff about your philosophy and your club and your procedures, you talk about service, you talk about positive attitude and so forth. And if you're not displaying that yourself, I mean, you've got no shot. So, and I wasn't always the most outgoing guy. I'm still not, but I'm very comfortable now when I'm greeting people and asking about their families and having a smile on my face. We have 3 new staff members here this year, so every time somebody walks in, I said, have you met Jackie? Have you met Alex? Have you met Chris? And, the hands out for me before they come in and get settled. And so that's sort of the example that I lead. And my interaction with people, I don't talk about myself. I try to talk about their families. So I think this is the last quality, but I think it might be the most important, because just like your kids will watch you as parents, your staff will watch and learn. I mean, I had a great example when I worked for Bill Strasbaugh. I mean, I just couldn't believe I'd never grown up in that environment in my life, at a club of that quality. And to watch him interact with people, the sincerity and the care that he had, I mean, my jaw dropped from time to time, and it really made an impact on me. And I said, boy, I better get comfortable doing that. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you get. So, it's the example you lead in meeting people. It's the example you lead, when we have a situation, a storm's coming in, and we've got to get people off the golf course. We all get out there. I'm out there moving carts around, getting bags out of the way, asking people to come inside. I'm not sitting inside watching. I'm doing these things. I teach as much as ever. I walk up from the parking lot to the chipping green. I'll stop by and give somebody a tip. So I think this is certainly one of the top 2 things that head professionals need to do. They need to be somebody and the person that your staff want to be like. I mean, as somebody else was to me in my career previously, I want to be like that. I want to be able to, communicate, interact, be positive like Jim is. And so that's certainly something I used to do a lot more consciously. Now I think I do it a little bit more unconsciously.
Right. Well, I mean, in my experience, I mean, I learned a lot from the people that I work for, but I also learned a lot of things that I wasn't going to do. I mean, maybe it was more just like, hey, I don't think I would handle that situation that way, or to just flat out, that's not right, and I would never do that. So you can learn a lot either way, but certainly, like you say, I mean, leading by example and being that role model is, so I put this as the last one, but I believe me, this is the first on the list, I think.
Yeah, so to understand that when I'm here every day running a staff meeting or running an event or greeting members or out in front of the shop or teaching, that my staff is watching, and I want to be do my best so they can see and hopefully learn from that, do their best. So
absolutely, absolutely. Well, I wanted to take a few moments here. You know, we're kind of at our at the end of our talk here, but I wanted to open it up to anybody that had any questions specifically for Jim, or just, you know, some thoughts on mentoring. You know, you have the ability to type in questions, and I can read those and let Jim give his thoughts. If you want to be unmuted, I can unmute you to speak as well. So if we have any questions, you know, let's give it a couple minutes here for our audience to send anything in, and if not, we'll just sign off. But if anybody does have any of those questions right now, and you know, again, I want to thank Jim for being here with us and taking the time out of your day. I'm sure you know, a lot of things going on there, and everybody has a lot going on. But really appreciate your time, Jim. So thanks for your thoughts.
sure, I'm sure Chris Knapwich has something to say, doesn't he?
Well, Chris, any questions for Jim, or how's everything with Chris right now? We'll see what he has anything to say. He probably got pulled away from the call. I'm sure, you know, he's got a million people to meet there. But anyways, well, I don't. If anybody has any questions, you know, let me know, or if you want to follow up, I'm going to have this recording on the website later, and I'll send an email to everybody with the presentation, and then also, if Jim doesn't mind that, I'll just send his email along with it. If you don't have any questions for him. Somebody just asked about unmuting me. If you want to be unmuted, there's a way to raise your hand, and I can see who you are, and I can unmute you. Unfortunately, I can't see who that is. Oh no, that's Chris. Okay. Let's see. Chris, it says I can't unmute you right now until you enter your PIN. So I don't know if you called in, there should be a PIN that you have to enter. I'd be happy to do that. Chris said everything's great out there. He didn't want to be unmuted. He probably wanted to give you tell you how good he was doing there. Unfortunately, I can't unmute him right now. But anyways, looks like everybody's running off the call. Jim, thanks again.
Sure.
And Chris, I'll follow up with you on your question there, and we'll go from there. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking.
Yes, sir. Take care.